Okay, so today's video is going to be a bit different because today I'm not talking to diehard audiophiles. I'm talking to normal people who might own something like this, which is the Apple AirPods Pro 2, but also normal people who own the AirPods or the AirPods Max or Sony True Wireless IEMs or Sennheiser True Wireless IEMs or Bose True Wireless IEMs. And if you're wondering what IEM means, it's just a fancy way of saying earphone. It stands for in-ear monitor. So yeah, today, normal people.
This episode is brought to you by Bowers Wilkins, makers of the PI8 True Wireless IEM. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
So yeah, the AirPods Pro 2 and the AirPods, they're great, aren't they? They really are great. Now, I use the AirPods Pro 2 for three main reasons. So firstly, they offer good, if not great sound quality with music. Secondly, their noise cancellation is outstanding. I think it's better than Sony's and better than Sennheiser's. And thirdly, and probably most importantly for me, their phone call quality is the best available among all of the true wireless earphones that I have tried. And what I mean by that is that the AirPods Pro 2 are the only true wireless IEM that I can use for phone calls without frustrating the person on the other end of the call with dropouts and voice clarity issues, especially when I'm outside. But there is a downside to AirPods in that you need an iPhone to get the very best out of them. And me, I'm an Android user. So I bought an iPhone 13 mini specifically to make phone calls with the AirPods Pro version 2. And it also helps that the AirPods handling of music isn't terrible, but it's not as good as, say, the Sennheiser Momentum True Wireless 4. But the Momentum True Wireless 4, they sound best with an Android phone. It just gets ridiculous, doesn't it? So for the past 3 years, I've been carrying two phones around for use with two different sets of true wireless IEMs. So the Sennheiser with an Android phone, and that's when I want to do mainly music listening, but with the occasional phone call, although the phone calls aren't great through the Sennheiser. And then I carry the AirPods Pro 2 with an iPhone for days when I know I'm going to be doing a lot of phone calls and maybe listen to some podcasts and maybe just a bit of music listening. Now, I think that is, that's excessive, isn't it? And that's not even the whole story, because I've also been using Sennheiser's IE300 wired earphones. They're in this pouch here. I've been using those with an Asus Zenfone 10 smartphone. I've got that over here. But I use those two together because they sound better than the Momentum True Wireless 4, even with the built-in headphone socket on the Asus phone. And that headphone socket, I think, sounds about the same as your average dongle DAC. It's nothing really special. And besides, I keep losing my dongle DACs. I put them down or I put them in a safe space and I can never find them again. But this year, things have begun to shift. So Campfire Audio sent me their new, more affordable model. It's called the Axion. I've got it here. You can see that it's a wired earphone, a bit like the Sennheiser IE300, a bit like it is very much like the Sennheiser IE300 in that it's wired, but it sells for the same money as the Sennheiser IE300 and the AirPods Pro version 2. Those are the earpieces there. And then I'll quickly show you the IE300 from Sennheiser. I'm not great at keeping things in a way that they don't tangle. And yeah, this cable, the cable on this Sennheiser is easily its worst feature, and the Axion cable is much nicer than this. So the Axion, it has a small ear shell like the IE300, but its bullet shape and finger indent make it easier to plug into the ear and pull it out again. But there are no over-ear loops as there are on the Sennheiser to keep the Axion in place. And that means you'll probably need to spend more time finding the right ear tip from the extensive collection of foam and silicone options found in the Axion's box. And let us not forget that finding the right ear tip is fundamental to an earphone's passive noise isolation and its bass response. So if the in-ear seal isn't right, you'll hear more external noise and bass will sound light. And I gotta say, I found it harder than usual, to get a good seal in my ear with the Axion. Now the Axion's ear shell is made from a transparent plastic, and if we look closely inside, we can just about make out the driver housing, and that isn't just any new driver. It's a new driver type developed in-house by Campfire Audio. Now the driver's boxed enclosure makes it look a bit like a balanced armature, but it isn't. It's a dynamic driver, and to give it its full name, this is a full range silicone dynamic driver. And full range means it handles all of the frequencies, just like the drivers inside the IE300 and the AirPods Pro 2, but those dynamic drivers are more traditional in design. Now I've already said that the cable on the Axion I think is a lot nicer than the one on the Sennheiser IE300, but the Axion also features a little housing here which has a microphone and a 3-button remote control. So it does play, pause, volume up and down, and that play pause button can also be used to accept and end phone calls. And in my experience outdoors, call quality is clearer with the wired Axion than with the wireless AirPods Pro version 2, although I would say that's pretty much true when comparing any true wireless earphone with any wired earphone, in that, yeah, the microphone sound from a wired earphone is generally a lot better. Now for music listening outside of the house, I use an app called Roon Arc, and it talks to my Roon server, which is back at home. You can see it just over my left shoulder there. And that server will stream anything stored on it to my phone, no matter where I am in the world, to the Roon Arc app. So essentially that Roon Arc app is my private streaming service. And for music that I don't own as a download or a CD rip, Roon can also integrate Tidal and Qobuz. But you should know that Roon isn't licensed for offline downloads of music supplied by those services. Now that restriction comes from the music labels and not from the streaming services themselves. So if you want Roon Arc to play music when you're up in the air, you'll need to offline something from your local library. And I would like to thank Roon for sponsoring this video. Now, of course, the Campfire Axion aren't the only wired earphones to have a microphone and remote control built into the cable. And many of the rivals that do are more affordable than the Axion. But how many of those rivals have a USB-C termination at the other end of the cable? So inside this USB-C connector sits a chip that works as a DAC and a headphone amplifier, and probably an ADC as well for the phone calls, although I'm guessing there. So that means we can connect the Axion directly to an Android phone or an iPhone 15 or later, or a Mac or a PC. And that's because they all have USB-C sockets, and we never need to worry about a dongle DAC ever again. Now the DAC inside the Axion is rated for PCM up to 384 kilohertz, but Android users should make sure, if possible, that their playback app of choice isn't resampling audio to 48 kilohertz. Not that it's really much of a big deal if it does, because audiophiles like to make a lot of noise about bit-perfect digital signals, but those, I think, have far less of an impact on what we hear than the hardware it feeds. So I think bit-perfect is an unnecessary distraction for this conversation. And let us not forget that wired headphones give us lossless audio all the time and every time. And you cannot say that about Bluetooth earphones whose lossless carriage tops out with CD quality, but only when certain conditions are met. So for example, the smartphone and the Bluetooth earphones must both support aptX lossless. And if you want to know more about that, I made a video about it, I think about a year ago, and I'll put a link in the show notes below. Furthermore, true wireless IEMs don't do high-res audio, and they probably never will, no matter what the yellow logo on the box tries to tell you. So high-res audio over Bluetooth is always lossy. Data is always thrown away. It's not like the high-res that we get at home. Mind you, high-res audio has far less of an impact on what we hear than the hardware that it feeds. So I think high-res audio is an unnecessary distraction for this conversation. And I think personally, the jump from lossy audio to CD quality lossless is more important than the jump from lossless CD quality to high-res. Okay, there are audiophiles out there who can deduce an earphone's sound quality just by looking at its frequency response graph. Campfire Audio have published one of those, but I am not one of those people. I have to listen to an earphone to determine how it sounds. And I think the Axion leave the AirPods Pro 2 in the dust when it comes to communicating music's larger shifts. So by contrast, the AirPods sound similarly detailed, but dynamically, I guess, restrained. It sounds like they're in some kind of dynamic straitjacket. And we get none of the Axion's effortless, expansive low end when listening to Barker's Resident Advisor mix. And I would like to give a shout out to Sam Barker for sending me the FLAC of that mix. And we don't get the Axion's richer mid-range when listening to Dean Wareham through the AirPods, which by contrast, I think sound a bit papery. So with this kind of singer-songwriter stuff, I would describe the Campfire as warm and wide and the Apple as crisp and dry. So I think the Axion, they sound like they're playing music through thicker air. And perhaps most obviously, the Axion sounds more natural than the AirPods Pro version 2. Now maybe that's because the Campfire don't lean on DSP to shape the driver's frequency response. I don't really know. I think I'm guessing there, but I do know that this was a side-by-side comparison. Now, how do the Axion compare to the Sennheiser IE300? I've been using both models side by side for the last couple of months. So I think it's quite obvious right now that the Axion can do phone calls and the IE300 cannot. But the Axion's earpieces are more of a challenge to keep in place than the IE300s. Now on sound quality, I hear the Sennheiser as sitting somewhere between the Campfire's expansive warmth and the AirPods' crispy dryness, but probably closer to the Campfire than the AirPods. And the Axion definitely lends Al Wooten's electronic music a thicker, fatter, chunkier sounding low end. And they sound lusher in the mids than the IE300 with Deadbeat's dub techno. So this in turn makes the Axion more forgiving of lesser quality recordings like early Pulp demos than the IE300, but they can sound a little closed in at times. I'm talking about the Campfire here. Now some people might call the Sennheiser the more accurate of the two and the Campfire the more musical of the two. Musical. But of course, the Campfire and the Sennheiser come with the compromise of a dangling wire, and they don't have any active noise cancellation. So I still prefer the AirPods for in-flight use. But the Axion are a major step up from the AirPods in that their sound doesn't have that kind of processed tinge to it like a microwaved frozen meal. So in that sense, the Axion are closer to the IE300 than the IE300 are to the Apple True Wireless. But I'm not saying the Campfire Axion are for everyone. They absolutely are not. But if you're more of a music fan than a no-wire obsessive, there is a lot to be said for going back to wired earphones, especially when those wired earphones connect directly to any modern phone or computer's USB-C port, and also when they make fewer compromises with phone call quality. That's a big one for me. So the upshot for me is that now I only need to take one phone and the Axion out of the door with me when I head out for a couple of hours. Anyway, that's all from me for today. If you like what you saw and heard, please consider subscribing below. And if you didn't like what you saw and heard, I thank you for watching anyway. And if you like the music that you heard in this video, or you're curious about the music that I talked about in this video, remember that playlists for this video and every video we've made since 2020 are available on my Patreon. Okay, let's wrap this video with 3 more thoughts. Firstly, if you're a regular viewer of this channel and you're wondering what happened to the Moondrop Myad 1 smartphone, I used that in Lisbon with higher end IEMs. Secondly, the silicone pouch that I used to carry the Axion is available from Amazon. They come in packs of 3, I think, and I'll put a link in the show notes below. And thirdly, Campfire wanted to send me their new Alien Brain IEM, but I politely declined because I'd already tried a set and I couldn't get them to stay in my ear properly for long enough. And this reminds us that everyone's ear shape is different and that we all experience IEMs or earphones differently.